Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Screen Junkies Universe. We're currently on the road in real time on our way to San Diego Comic-Con, where we hope to see you guys there. But you know what? We're going to pause for a minute and take a moment to reflect on the history of cinema. It is the 10th anniversary of the release of The Dark Knight.
Oof.
Oh, yeah, that's exciting. This was the biggest opening weekend at the time that it was released. It has still the highest grossing Batman movie and DC Comics grosser domestically. It changed the face of comic book movies. This is the only comic book movie to award an actor an Academy Award posthumously for Heath Ledger. This is a big deal, you guys. This is The Dark Knight. Who has seen it the most recently of us?
Probably Dan. I watched it for the Nolan trailer. So I watched it again a few months. I mean, I've seen it many times.
How did it feel compared to when you originally saw it?
I mean, when I originally saw it, it was, again, it's tough, particularly because I think so much of current comic book movie fandom spawned from The Dark Knight that it's always a little tough to like say, I remember when, but it for me, it was one of the first times that you look at, comic movies are sort of in a certain strata of movies where it's just like, the first Spider-Man movie and even, Spider-Man 2. Really enjoyable, but they were sort of like comic book movies,
the Spider-Man movies,
and The Dark Knight. When you saw that, and you're like, wow, like this is not even aspiring to be a comic book movie. This is just aspiring to be a great movie, and I think it was important for the genre in the sense of like it broke through that the Oscars changed how many movies they get nominated for Best Picture, largely because The Dark Knight was not nominated. And there was such an uproar about it that they were like, okay, we're going to expand how many nominees we can have. I mean, it really did a lot for the genre as far as legitimizing it in a lot of ways. But at the same time, no movie's perfect. I think that there's some things that I looked back on 10 years later that I see now are like, okay, there's little quibbles here and there about it, but, largely anchored by Heath Ledger. Which that has not aged one iota since it came out. I think it's a really entertaining movie, but I think there have been so many after it that it's sort of now contextualized retroactively by what else has come after it, and you can compare and contrast to things that we didn't have, that weren't there before.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that performance is not just for a comic book movie, but for any movie. One of the most indelible that we've seen certainly in the last several decades. He really captured something that I think hit beyond what the Joker is even. It certainly hit what the Joker was for people, and that in and of itself was an achievement after Jack Nicholson, which people thought, look, he can't top what Jack Nicholson did, but he did something so wildly different that resonated with people. Well, what do you think about the movie on the whole, Joe?
I think like Dan said, there's after 10 years of watching it over and over and over again, I think there's a really great Joker short film inside a much less good, a much more average Batman movie. His opening bank heist, I think, is incredible. Every time Heath Ledger's on the screen, you can't stop watching him. I remember the reaction in the theater to the magic trick, just the theater just nervously laughing together. And it was the first time you could tell that the whole audience was incredibly uncomfortable about how easy it was to just instantly really love the Joker and to kind of side with the Joker in this movie, which was a really cool thing to sort of feel with 100 strangers in a room. But otherwise, I don't think Nolan really knew how to shoot action for a Batman movie yet. When he captures the Scarecrow and you just see lots of close-ups of bat arms, that's really all that action scene is, that first sequence. Nolan's way too close with the camera on that. A lot of it's super on the nose, the philosophy 101 thing of would you blow up the boat of normal people or the boat of criminals, and stuff like that, which almost seem below the Joker and what Heath Ledger brought to him. Like those seemed like things that he might have thought of in his first days as the Joker and then sort of tossed aside. So in a lot of ways, the movie's sort of running to catch up to that performance. But I mean, overall, there's awesome stuff in it. I'll always watch it. I'm conflicted sometimes because it's a great comic book movie, but in order to get there, he's stripped so much of the comic book away from it. Like, there's nothing from Batman Begins in that movie, in terms of like the feel of Gotham City or the comic mythology or ninjas
Katie
running
Holmes.
around. Yeah, Katie Holmes. So that's always sort of a challenge to wrap your head around. It's the greatest comic book movie ever, and they did it by changing Gotham City to Chicago. But
Well, that is kind of, I wanted you to weigh in, Spencer, that is kind of what some people talk about as the double-edged sword of it, where it captured something no one else had done in a comic book movie before, really. And yet I think that in certain ways it set a precedent that has been chased since then, maybe in a way that has limited the ability for some creators to do something even Batman, create a new kind of Batman divorced of that, the weight of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that this movie to me has more in common with like Heat or like a Michael Mann, like slick crime movie with some really big personalities in it than it does with other comic book movies. I haven't seen it in like 4 or 5 years all the way through. That said, there are sequences in this movie that will stay with me for the rest of my life. The bank heist sequence, probably the best bank heist sequence on film. In the conversation, there's the car chase, him walking into the mob, the interrogation scene, like these. While it doesn't completely tie together for me as a whole movie, like shot for shot and sequence for sequence, I think it's one of the best comic book movies ever made.
Yeah, and the Batman Joker stuff works incredibly well and still does. The main thing that I look at going back, and again, this is with 10 extra years of history on your side and seeing more commentary, but that's really the main thing is I feel like because it treated things so seriously and was, why so serious, and was going for legitimacy, like it was very upfront about how complex of a story it wanted to tell. And that to me is where I look at things like, that's a little more, like every theme on that movie is very on the nose. You either die a hero, you live long enough to become a villain, said by the guy who didn't die a hero and live long enough to become a villain. And, I just, the main thing that I always go back to is Morgan Freeman standing in front of the big surveillance monitor and just going, this is wrong. Like, yes.
we get it. We know.
It's so, very overt and trying to be like push, like this is very thematically deep movie that I feel like they lay it on so thick sometimes that I'm like, I don't need you to take that leap for me as like, I either know the character of Two-Face or we're going to find out later on how tragic it is that you're the hero and you become the villain. Like, I don't really need that kind of like, I'm going to tell you how tragic it is that
it's almost
I'm
like
going to become...
It's almost like a James Rhodes going, next time, baby.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that hasn't aged for me well in the movie is just how overt the movie is thematically about what it's doing. And it's just like, it's basically like, this is about the surveillance state. Like, I know. Yep. I get it. You don't need to kind of shout
hear
it
that
from
in
the
the back?
rooftops. Exactly. So, that's the stuff that hasn't really aged well, is that it's not a very subtle movie about what it's doing. But I think part of that is the function of the fact that I think they wanted it to be taken very seriously.
Yeah, I
so
also
they
don't
were
think
very
there's ever
upfront about
there's never
what they were
been a
doing.
subtle Batman movie.
Yeah.
I mean, this is American mythology. These are archetypes, and that's the great thing about DC is like these are
Returns was pretty subtle with the penguins with the rockets on their back.
I think that there's a very
They're
nuanced. I think there's a very nuanced commentary about late 20th century capitalism hidden inside Batman and Robin. So I would challenge you on that point.
yeah.
Surfing down the roofs on a handmade surfboard or
On a T-Rex, it's like we're ruining the climate. You know?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it had a lot to say about global
point.
warming, deforestation. No, it didn't.
Returns
I
is
don't think
definitely
we've ever seen a movie, though, a comic book movie since then, do that successfully. I don't think we've seen a comic book movie ground itself in our world in quite the way that that film in particular did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Wonder Woman tapped into the zeitgeist, whether intentionally or not.
I don't think they
in a way
necessarily
that the
need
Dark
to
Knight
either.
did. Yeah, no, I don't think
think
Wonder Woman did it overtly. I think
Joe's
it just
favorite
arrived at
movie,
a moment.
Logan.
Logan, yeah,
Logan.
okay, you're right. Logan did it, and then like the new Joker movie that we have
We'll
mixed
see.
feelings about. We'll see has a shot to do that, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it introduced a way to tell these kinds of stories that was unlike anything that we had seen before, and it revitalized the genre in that way. But at the same time, I really think that DC in particular has been chasing Nolan, trying to get out of the shadow of Nolan now for a decade.
Also, Logan's not grounded. It's just sad. Just crushingly sad. Yeah. It's about a man who fights a young version of himself to save a clone girl of himself.
You've not done that?
Yeah. True.
Well, and it also
Haven't
gave us, with respect to Batman Begins, I think that The Dark Knight was what Hollywood set up and took notice as the capital D, capital G, dark and gritty reboot.
Yes.
And the sense of, okay, Batman Dark Knight was incredibly successful, one of the most successful movies of all time. Do that.
If it can
Again.
work for Batman, it can work for Peter Pan.
Yeah, exactly.
It can literally work for anything. It could work for Tinkerbell.
I have a whole thing about Tinkerbell.
There's a whole thing about Tinkerbell, which I will tell you later. I do think that it's been sort of the albatross around DC's neck, that they're now not in the way that they weren't great, but in the way that they then felt, I think, kind of just in this gilded cage a little bit, that was their identity, and that was their identity that would distinguish them from what Marvel was doing. And they've been finding themselves and finding their tone since then. They're going to release a big slate at Comic-Con on Saturday. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Aquaman certainly doesn't look like it's a movie that's taking itself overly seriously. It looks like a good time with fish.
Heck yeah. I want it to somehow be a big metaphor for the surveillance state too.
But on the other side, Venom looks like a movie that is trying to do that. Venom, coming from Sony, looks like a movie that is trying to do something sort of similar in that respect.
Fine. Look, it's like silly, gritty, positive, negative. Throw that all out the window. Just think of what suits the character.
Yeah.
And I think that dark, gritty, depressing, gothic, intense fits Batman.
Yeah. Does not fit Superman.
Doesn't necessarily fit. You're putting Superman into a too small phone booth with that. But
and I think
breathe,
that well done.
man.
And when you talk about the albatross, I think part of the reason that Man of Steel had a tone very similar to that is I almost feel like Warner Brothers felt that that's what was expected of them. Like after The Dark Knight, they're like, well, they're going to expect something similar from Man of Steel, so we need to deliver something similar. And that's where I think, success doesn't necessarily mean imitation, because I don't think that necessarily worked out as well. For
the interesting challenge for DC to me is its characters are so bright and iconic, and a lot of the times very silly. Like Green Lantern is a cool character, but he's also a very silly, ridiculous character. His weakness is yellow. So on one hand, you have all of these characters that are meant to speak to children of all ages from 1 to 99. But then every couple of years, DC will publish something that is meant for people who just put their big boy pants on. Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, Killing Joke, the film The Dark Knight. And so you have this weird juxtaposition of these are bright, iconic characters that are meant for everyone and are meant to relate to people of all ages. You should be able to pick up any Superman story no matter how old you are and enjoy it. Contrasted with the idea that these are the these really sort of like dark, introspective stories that people love. These are the linchpins that hold up the DC universe. So it's just a weird juxtaposition to me. That's an interesting challenge to overcome.
It looks like they're finding their way through it. And like I said, we'll definitely learn more. Dan Murrell is going to be there at the DC panel for us this weekend at Comic-Con, which he is our man.
He's our Dan.
Fist bump. I'm gonna my Dan. Fist bumping Aquaman.
Yeah. Booyah.
Yeah, you're gonna come back and have a.
I still think there's gonna be a big announcement.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that.
Big.
Let's talk about what we think is going to happen at Comic-Con. What we're most looking forward to seeing there. DC is probably the biggest thing in terms of news that'll come out of it. In addition, because Disney Marvel is not going, despite the fact it's the 10-year anniversary of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Which brings me to a point, which is I still, to this day, and maybe I'm just like wildly out of my mind, but they don't have D23 this year. This is a big anniversary for them. I find it impossible to believe that they're literally not going to do anything, even if it's just not physically be there, but dump a bunch of announcements and footage out of Comic-Con. What do you think?
But they can also, they've proven when they unveiled the roadmap, when they announced Civil War and all those movies, they just did it on a random day and they had all of the coverage to themselves.
Yeah.
I think they've proven that they can make the news. They don't need to share the stage with every other franchise. They can call. Kevin Feige booked the El Capitan on a Thursday in August.
We're all
and
showing
he's
up.
got the news cycle for a month as opposed
Yeah.
to one of 18 things coming out during Comic-Con.
I do think they'll passive aggressively do something.
Of course
this
they
week.
will.
Yeah.
I think
Like-
they'll do it to show, honestly, I think they'll do it to show their power. I wouldn't be, so the big day, like we've been talking about, is DC, which happens from 10 to 12:30 or 10:30 to 12:30 on Saturday morning. I really believe that Marvel, like, I don't know if they're going to be this passive aggressive about it, like that time release a bunch of stuff, but the day before perhaps, or later in the day, I do think that they'll release things to get you
Captain Marvel first look or
something like
yeah.
that to get you talking about Marvel also.
I
What
don't
do you
think so. They're not in competition. There's no neck and neck competition happening between DC and Marvel right now. Like, I don't know why they would try to one up DC as if they need that extra jump ahead of Aquaman. They're not trading blows as far as like grosses or having films that are competing with each other.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm Marvel, let them have it.
And I agree
They're
with
not
that.
breathing down their necks. The Marvel's Cinematic Universe is as successful as it's ever been, and DC is at a tipping point where they're reinventing themselves. I don't.
I agree with that. I just think
I
it's
don't know
pure
why they
spite.
would do it. Yeah,
Spite.
They're just like it's almost
Pettiness.
like when you just insult somebody by completely ignoring them. I feel like that's what Marvel's doing right now. They're like, you're not even worthy of my attention.
It is interesting what it says about sort of the future of Comic-Con, though. If they're really not showing up, it sort of lets you know what they think about Comic-Con
They
in
snap
terms of its
themselves out.
value. Yeah. So there's DC. There's also Venom will be there. The other studios are bringing kind of smaller things. They're bringing Fox is bringing Predator. They have Deadpool 2 panel for the home release, and they have a screening of the extended cut of Deadpool 2. We've got out of Universal Glass and Halloween, so they're leaning into their horror fair. In a way, looking at what they're bringing is sort of like a little bit looking at how the studios are planning to program or counter-program around each other. Like Universal having these niche horror films is interesting to me at Comic-Con versus like a big film. Paramount has Bumblebee. What do you guys? Is there anything that you're particularly hoping to see? By the way, it's also the anniversary of Breaking Bad, so I'll feel things about that.
Yeah.
The only thing I really want to see is, do you remember when Loki showed up at Hall H and Tom Hiddleston showed up in character and they did a big laser light show and he appeared and the lights went down and he was there? I want DC to try to top that with some kind of Waterworld-esque show with Aquaman, and I want it to go horribly wrong.
Wow.
Like,
okay.
Not like lethally or dangerously wrong, just annoyingly wrong. Like, Aquaman swings in with a big splash of water, and like the first half of Hall H gets soaked, and they're just annoyed for the rest of the day.
Sounds
That's
awesome.
what I want.
I love the
No,
Waterworld
they would
show.
thank
True.
Aquaman for soaking them and ask for more.
It is hot. Okay,
So
so
say again, like that's how Hall H works. There's no going wrong in Hall H.
this
Whatever
might
happens.
be the power of Hall H and Aquaman. I can't think of a way now then to get this ruined.
The only reason I'm bummed is because the way they did try to outdo each other was like, okay, Warner Brothers came in and took the full screens, like took over the entire room with screens, and then Marvel came in and they were like holograms, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I just want them to have to keep doing
We know
crazy stuff.
SeaWorld is close by and desperate for a buck, so
Yeah.
if they bring out a whale in the middle of the
You know?
Aquaman panel, just
then
like
it'll be whales confirmed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whales confirmed.
We're gonna conjure the actual Dormammu. Everyone join hands. No, we've gone too far.
H does a
We've
seance?
gone too far. That'd
be great.
That's how the world ends. That's how Earth Ragnarok happens. Is a one-upsmanship between two comic book corporations.
I like it. I just hope Halle Berry pretends to get drunk again. That was so fun.
Yes, for Kingsman.
Ugh.
You know what though? I feel like some of my favorite things at Comic-Con are I don't go to the panels that much anymore. I don't think I'm doing one or two, maybe the Venom one this year. But what I do like is like when you're in the Hall H and you can feel little kids go up and ask these questions, and you can feel like the genuine, authentic excitement, even if it's just for a smaller thing. Like, I would love to be in the Breaking Bad room. I freaking love that show. And I bet the fans that are in there are going to be so legitimately...
kids.
When you disintegrated the body in the acid. When you knock... Do you knock 3 times or just till death?
Yeah,
that kind
You
of
know,
thing.
like
It's
that kind of
annoying.
thing. It's just
Warms
very
your heart.
heartwarming.
When Ryan Reynolds memorized the Green Lantern oath.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like he won Comic-Con forever when he
that
just
look.
recited it off the cuff. I'm sure he knew, hey, it's pretty smart. I should probably know this thing. But that's good prep work is what I'm saying. He knows how to market a movie. Him and The Rock.
I'm curious this year because last year I did most of our Hall H coverage, or like a lot of it, and it was like the same 6 people that asked questions at every panel.
Well, then it's not entirely random. It can't be because you have
they-
to get good
Plants?
questions.
They need to at least do a little better with their plants.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was.
Come
I don't know
on,
if those
it's
are just the
Hollywood.
crazy super fans that are somehow just like making it work and have perfected how they do
But can you
Comic-Con,
imagine
but-
waiting for days on the street and then someone goes and their question is like about themselves?
Yeah.
Which is usually what happens.
Yeah.
Because it's like 5 minutes, or it's one of those people that's just like, "Hey, a big fan. I have 4 questions in a statement." It's like, no, one question.
I like it. There's always it's easy to be cynical about this stuff, but you know, even before Defenders came out, and I hated it. My favorite Defenders moment is still at the Hall H panel last year when Jeff Loeb was like, "We're going to show you guys a clip of Defenders. It is the exact length of the pilot," and like everybody lost their minds. That stuff's really fun.
That is fun. I don't know. And I kind of like, I don't know. I give it to the people that are going up there and asking the questions. Sometimes people get impatient with them. I'm like, that's probably really nerve wracking. You're in a room full of thousands of people. You're talking to these people that you love and admire. Like, give them a break. Cut them a break.
You go talk to Spider-Man.
You go talk to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
See how you feel.
See
It's not
how
so
easy it
easy
is.
now, is it?
I want Andrew Garfield to keep showing up to Hall H panels dressed as Spider-Man like he did when his movie was coming out, and he just always reveals himself as Andrew Garfield after he asks his question.
Well, we are going to be there, as we
Yeah.
said. What's the number one thing you're most looking forward to us doing there, Dan? We have our panel.
We do have our panel. That's always, for me, the most fun, is getting to do our panel and then meet
be
people
good.
and say hi to fans. I love that we get a chance every year, at least once, to say hi to people and meet them. And, it's good to see the other people on the other side of the screen. So I'm looking forward to that. And then otherwise, it's always it's a weird thing when you're in the middle of it, you're like, oh my God, what's going on? And then you get to the end of it and you look back and you're like, oh, that was kind of fun. We get to talk to this person or that person, or this was a big announcement. And it kind of sets the stage for what the next 2 years of sitting at this desk will be like, partially.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
At Comic-Con. So, it's like, what are they going to pull out of the hat this year? Maybe nothing. Maybe Batman v Superman 2, which happened 2 or whatever.
The rematch.
What about you? Spencer?
The California burrito is interesting because
Spencer.
it's not really available in Los Angeles. It's even more Southern California than LA, and it is a burrito stuffed with French fries. Now that is an innovation that San Diego has brought to the burrito game. That every year
Wait,
I make sure I have.
just French fries?
No, it's
It's like other
it's
burrito
guacamole, meat, carne asada, cheese, and fries in the burrito.
That's a Del Taco meal in a shell.
It's a Del Taco meal in a tortilla
Yeah.
and grilled to perfection. And I find that every year I get a yearly craving, and I got to go to Comic-Con to scratch that itch.
All right, so the burrito for you, Joe. What food item do you want to eat?
I think that you should buy some very cheap hot wings or nachos Friday at 10 at the American Comedy Club, because me and Danielle Radford
and Mark Ellis,
and
right?
Mark
yeah.
Ellis and Ify Wadaway, Ken Knapsack are all doing stand-up 10 p.m. at the American Comedy Club. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a real good show.
Well, we are going to be at our panel on Thursday at 7:15. I would tell you what room it is, but
6
BCF.
6BCF, aka the Viper Room. 6BCF.
Don't ask for the Viper Room. They won't know what you're talking about.
They won't.
See us there. We'll have it on Twitter as well, and we will be covering all week long. So do tune in. Say hello. Hello.
Say hi.
Hey.
Hey.
Comic-Con.
Yeah.
We'll see you next
If you can't
week.
find 6BCF,
We'll
just
see
say,
you tomorrow on
"Where are
Thursday,
they?"
live at Comic-Con. San Diego. We'll have special guests, too. Clark Wolf will be there. Lots of fun people.
Where's the panel? Where's the ScreenJunkies?
That was